Hello everyone, I'm Preston-Watson, and welcome to my talk, Demystifying Accessibility. I am so nervous right now, so I might be sitting at some point because I'm like, I don't want to pass out. So just so kind of get that stuff up front. So this talk is really about kind of, and sorry if you see me go through my notes, again, like a little bit nervous. It's to provide kind of information that explains why myths about web accessibility are just that, myths. Before we get started, I wanted to kind of go over my background. I have about 10 years of experience. These are some of the positions I've held: web editor for Westward. I was interactive producer at the Rock Mountain News. For those of you who are new, they were the biggest, the main rival against the Denver Post before they closed down. I was a front-end developer, mostly freelance here in Denver and also Toronto. And then for the last couple of years, I've been a QA engineer doing some accessibility testing. And in a couple weeks, I'll be starting as a accessibility engineer at a insurance company as soon as those background checks come back. But also on a personal level, I am someone who has a visual impairment. In my left eye, I was diagnosed with keratoconus, and that is kind of a misshaping of the cornea. And so right now you see I have glasses. These glasses actually don't do anything other than I want to protect the goods. I wear a rigid gas contact to help shape my cornea back, to get it back into shape. And I also have, in my right eye, I have ocular toxoplasmosis, and I had that since birth. It was passed to me through my mom. It's a parasite mostly found in cats, but it also affects a lot of people who live in and around the Mississippi River. And so my macula, which kind of helps with central vision, has a huge scar on it. So pretty much I can't see anything outside of in my right eye other than like shapes and so if I go like this, I can't see any of that. I can see that there's people, but I can't read anything like that at all. So so here's our agenda for today. Please, there's a lot, and I'm not going to go over just everything that web accessibility is. I'm really trying to give you a deep, thorough overview, because I think that's part of the reasons why there's so many myths and misconceptions, is that there's just so much to dig through, and people kind of use other people to kind of oh, well, they said this, so that's what obvious is. So with our agenda, we're going to go and talk about what is web accessibility. Talk about 5 of the biggest myths of web accessibility, do some guidelines and standards, and a little bit of best practices. So, what is web accessibility? Oh, yeah, I went back. So pretty much, I went a little bit too fast. It's just that users, websites that allow people to use it no matter what their ability is. Every user, no matter what their ability. Yes, it's pretty simple. It's really what it says. Everyone has access to the web, and those websites users can perceive, understand, navigate, and contribute. This is something that will come up later on again when I go over guidelines. But yes, if you have a website that does that, your website will be accessible. So I'm going to get into 5 myths about web accessibility. And myth 1, people with disabilities don't use the internet. This is probably one of the most, I I don't understand this one. It's, you know, it's so like, oh yeah, you have a disability and, you know, yeah, you don't use the internet, something that, you know, that everyone, you know, uses. Right now, about 15% of the world's population, so 1 billion people, have some form of disability. Over 56 million live in the United States, and 28 million use the internet on a daily basis. So I think a little bit about, I think a little bit of why there's the myth of, well, people who have disabilities don't go on the internet is because that there's a lot of barriers. So about 23% of people with who have disabilities said they've never been on the internet because they feel the cost of the equipment. Assistive technologies can be very expensive. JAWS, which is a popular screen reader for Windows, is about $1,000. It's very expensive. It's also very expensive if you're trying to do accessibility testing, which I've done before, just to get a license. And there's no multi-license JAWS and if I'm wrong about that, but the last time I checked, there really wasn't. So if you're going to buy JAWS, it's for like one-use license, $1,000. Lack of training. Some of these accessible, you know, like these access technologies are a little bit like the learning curve is a little bit steep, and so there's not a lot of training programs for people to learn about like how to use these to navigate the internet. So that's something that's a big barrier. And one thing that's the reason why I'm doing this talk, the inaccessibility of web content. I mean, there's people who want to go online, but they just can't because they have no way, even if they have the training, if they have the devices, they try to go to a website, and it's just impossible for them to navigate onto that site. So this comes about because I was on Reddit a couple of weeks ago, and someone said, well, do blind people know what memes are? And it was such a funny question because it was a funny question because it was like, of course blind people know what memes are, but I realized, I guess it's not too far-fetched to ask because a lot of memes are not really, they're not like transcribed. So I found this little clickhole, and actually if you go there, and I have links to this stuff, so at the end I will put a link to my GitHub where I have this presentation. They actually transcribed 10 cat gifs. And that's something like, it seems funny, but it means so much to someone who wants to interact on the internet. Like, yes, blind people want to have memes. They want to know like a cat gif. Like, they want to see, like, they want to, you know, like, understand that Kermit gif with like him drinking tea and, you know, talk about buying a boat. Like, it's So myth 2 is web accessibility is expensive and hard to implement. And what I have to say about that is an accessible website costs the same as developing an accessible website. Have you ever, I know when I was doing front-end development, there was several times I was working with a client where they never made known that they wanted backwards compatibility with certain IE versions. So we're doing IE 10, and they're like, hey, can you go and make sure that this is, our website is compatible with IE 7? And yeah, that's one of those things of like, that was really expensive because now, we're like 2 weeks away from launch date, and now we need to go back and try to really just slap a lot of, a lot of fixes onto there. And really, the accessibility doesn't have to cost. It doesn't really cost that much if you really start at the beginning. When you're in the design phase, when you're in the planning phase, really just think about accessibility and how you, like, what you need to do for it. I'm going to talk a little bit about this later on, but like semantic HTML is something that's huge for web accessibility and making sure that you have an accessible website. You know, kind of checking against guidelines. You know, with WCAG, which is who kind of does the web accessibility and just technology accessibility guidelines. That is something that's super huge, and it doesn't cost extra. It just really just means you just have to begin at the beginning. Accessibility makes websites ugly. I can't tell you how many websites I've been on that are super ugly, but also inaccessible. And I know that because 2 of them I created. And I think it's like, most of those were my portfolios, and I'm like, oh man, this looks awesome. And then I used the screen reader, and it's like, yeah, this is not awesome, and also these colors are atrocious, but you know, it's like, oh, I made a choice. Design and accessibility are not mutually exclusive. Honestly, when you take the kind of proactive choice to really think about what you want to portray to your users, and knowing that you need to do this for all your users, no matter how they're coming and access your site, you can make some very beautiful things. These are just a few sites that are really, I think, like aesthetically pleasing, but also very accessible. Google, Apple, Microsoft, and don't forget that one. But it's really nice, and it's accessible because I was on it for quite a while last night. So, web accessibility is just for disabilities, and if I'm going too fast, please let me know because I have a lot. And so I'm just like, I want to make sure you guys get all this stuff, but you know, and I want to also give you time to ask questions. So if I'm going too fast, tell me to slow down, and I will. So I think we think about, that myth comes about that the web is a visual medium, but it's really, and I think it really started off as a visual medium. I might be kind of be a little bit hyperbolic about that, but it's so much more now. There's so much, like, it's not just seeing, you're doing so much with different websites and the way you interact with things. And depending on your disability, if a poorly accessible site is not, you know, if it's poorly accessible, they may not be able to get to experience that. And so these are the 4 major types of disabilities: visual, motor, cognitive, and auditory. And I'm gonna go a little bit into, you know, what that means, and some of the bigger and one bigger issue that someone with that disability might face. So with visual disabilities, that means a reduction in vision that cannot be corrected with standard glasses, contact lenses, medicine, or surgery. And so that would maybe be someone who has blindness, age-related macular degeneration, and color blindness. And someone who has a visual disability, if you have inefficient color contrast, that's a huge barrier for your site being accessible. I had my contact out and I was viewing this. This is SoundCloud. Even right now, you may not be able to see it. I put a red box there. You cannot see those links, and I know I couldn't. So I actually got right up against my screen. I was like, what is that? I see the language English, that's it. But that's something that's huge, and a lot of websites do this. They have their contrast color ratio is very, very poor, and it really, you know, is someone who's coming to your site who has, like me, who may not have their contact in, who are coming who have low vision and they don't have a screen reader to read that for, they don't know what that is. So auditory disabilities, that is full or partial decrease in the ability to detect or understand sound, and that's someone who's going to be deaf or is suffering hearing loss. Again, there's a lot that goes into it, and I'm not even really, there's so much into like the levels of disabilities that people might suffer. So again, I implore you to go after this talk, go and read more about it. But these are kind of two things for this one. And one thing that's huge is incorrect or missing captions on video. I actually was on the DVLP YouTube page, and I put on the auto-generated captions for this video. It's like, and he was talking about oh my God, I almost said Star Trek. I'm more of a Trekkie than, sorry, Star Wars fan, I'm sorry. And while looking at the captions, you know, he was talking about CP3O, and it was like D3VO, and I was just like, this is something, you know, someone who is relying on these captions, the context and the meaning of people's talks, you know, and what people are information people are trying to portray is completely lost. And there's also really offending people when you don't really mean to. Later on, he was talking about like slavery in the Star Wars kind of like universe, and it was corrected as flavoring, and I was just like, oh, okay. I was like, flavoring. That's it. But you know, that's a huge thing, and you're not trying. You know, it's something that's really huge that you know a lot of people really don't think about, and they, you know, especially if you're uploading. Sorry, my eyes are like. You're like, okay, well, I'll just use YouTube's auto-generated captions, but you're really, it may not work out so well. So with motor disabilities, that's physical impairments that can impede movement, coordination, and sensation. And that's loss or damage of limbs, someone has cerebral palsy, arthritis, so on. And with this, that's if you have navigation that has no focus, if someone's tabbing through it using a keyboard or an illogical tab order. I'll play this, and if you can see as they tab through the categories link, has no focus, and then it goes from the logo to the shopping cart to the sign in, and then back to news. And that's something that can be very confusing to someone because they don't really know exactly like what's all there. So if they want to go to categories, they can't because their screen reader or they're just as they're tapping through with their keyboard, they can't find it. So cognitive disabilities, difficulty receiving, recognizing, choosing, or understanding one or more types of mental tasks. That can be someone with ADHD, autism, dementia. This one has a lot. It's one of the ones that has a lot under it because there are like intellectual disabilities. There something that's starting to be put under here is also mental health. A lot of people with panic and anxiety disorders can, like, when it comes to like dark patterns, which are patterns that kind of with like UX and UI that kind of have the user they think they're doing one thing, but they're doing another. That's something that can really aggravate someone who has, say, social anxiety disorder or various other kind of anxiety disorders. And this is something I found, it's a math CAPTCHA, and it's asking you to verify by doing math. And it's also very, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm not great at math, and I like sat at that, you know, I was like, what are they asking me to do, like for like a couple seconds? And given like someone who like who may not, because there are disabilities, cognitive disabilities, where someone cannot really they have issues with understanding and kind of conceptualizing math problems. This is really not a great way to have someone verify, hey, you're human, do this math problem, because they are human, but they may just not be able to do that. So something that has to be said is that disabilities are not just permanent. They can be temporary or situational also. And what that means, and as I, you know what, nope, I'm not going to use these notes. With temporary, that might mean someone who has a broken arm and who is just in a cast. Someone with situational, like is a new parent who just has a child in their hand, and then, you know, they're trying to feed their baby, and there's a phone ringing, and for that like situation, that particular environment, they have an impairment. I really do like this. This is from Microsoft Design. They have a toolkit called Inclusivity 101. I linked to it in my slides, so I would suggest going and looking at that. It's really beautifully drawn, and it really has some really good information, especially when it comes to inclusive design. So I want to go, I'm not even doing this part a little bit of justice, because there's so much when it comes to assistive technologies. And that really is just devices, software, equipment that really help users do functional capabilities that they may not be able to do. And there are a lot, and I think a lot of people are used to screen readers, because that's something that, you know, if you have a Mac, you have VoiceOver. If you have an iOS phone, iPhone, you have VoiceOver there. If you have Android, actually, I think it comes already installed on like Google Pixel. You have TalkBack, and then for Windows, there's JAWS, there's NVDA, which is JAWS is the more expensive one. NVDA is free, so I think in a couple of years that one may kind of take over JAWS, right? Because JAWS is the most widely used screen reader, but NVDA is kind of, I think, catching up just because it is free. There's mouse sticks, because there are people who can control their head, but they can't use their hands and limbs, so they actually navigate the keyboard with a mouse stick. And they're saying with like the head wand, which maybe someone can't bite down, but they can still control their head, so they will use a head wand to use the keyboard. Eye tracking software, that's someone who can't do any sort of head movements, but they can control their eye movement, and they will use that. And then a sip and puff switch, someone who maybe doesn't have control over their visual eye movement, who maybe not have control over their head movement, but they can use their mouth to kind of like puff and blow and navigate that way. And for a lot of these assistive technologies, they are dependent, they use either the keyboard capabilities or integrate into that. So that's something to keep in mind if you have a website and it's not can't navigate by using the keyboard. Web accessibility only helps people with disabilities. I went to a little bit into that a little bit earlier with, and this is really not true. Web accessibility really does help everyone, and that's people who have disabilities, but people who do not. Because if you have a website, like especially a mobile site, and a lot of people, they're doing other things, and they're navigating by just their hand. one hand. And if you have a site that they can't, navigate by one hand, and they have something, I mean, it's inaccessible. Watching a video in a coffee shop. How many times have you been in a coffee shop and you had someone playing a video really, really loud? And this is something that maybe that person's not, being really rude. They really need to watch a video. Maybe they're just kind of studying up for a job interview. They want to kind of like, they have to get, they're like me and they're completely nervous about doing whiteboarding, and they're like trying to get, or they may be someone who doesn't know, because how many times have, I know being in the journalism field, for a while, a lot of sites would have autoplay video players. And so before Chrome had that icon, you didn't know sometimes that a video was playing. And if you're someone who's hard of hearing, or the place you're at very loud, you may not know there's a video going on in your browser. Someone who's inebriated. I know, like this, if you, one of the things that happens every year with like Uber and Lyft is that on New Year's Eve, a lot of people, they party, they celebrate, and they want to go back home, and they don't understand that they have a surge charge of like, I don't know, like 300%, and they're just like, I want to go home. I don't really understand this. Like, I don't know what 300%. Okay, cool. And they hit it, and then the next day they wake up and they have like a $500 Uber charge on their account. That's something that, now I know that's a little bit complicated, but if there was a more kind of like a friendlier way to kind of convey that information of like, if you hit this, you will be charged a lot of money. That would probably help a lot of people not feel so bad. January 2nd or 1st, I can tell. I can tell dates. And the person who doesn't want to put her contact in, that's me. Having a hard contact can be very painful sometimes. And it's not something that you just get used to, at least for me and a lot of people who have keratoconus. So there's a lot of times I just don't want to put my contact in, and that really hinders how I can interact with sites. I do sometimes rely on talkback on my phone, but a lot of times I'm just going like this, and just kind of like, I have literally watched YouTube videos like that when I didn't want to put on my contact. And, or if I've navigated to a website and I don't have my contact in and the color contrast is off, I have to either, a lot of times I'm just like, nope, I'm not gonna do this right now, or I have to really get close, or I have to turn on a screen reader. So, guidelines and standards. I got the time. I want to make sure I'm not. I want to be able to.
3:30.
3:30. Okay, cool. So I want to go into kind of the guidelines of like, how do you make a website accessible? So there's one kind of definitive source for that, and that is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. I don't know how to pronounce it. I just go WCAG. And this is a series of internationally recognized guidelines for improving web accessibility created by W3C. And if you've done a little bit of, you've been introduced to accessibility at your different companies, this is something that might have come up. And the reason why is a lot of countries and a lot of institutions rely on this to make sure that they are web accessible, and also certain countries, this is what they use to make sure that you are within the law. So you can make sure that you're within the guidelines if your website does this. It's called core, and it means perceivable. Users must be able to perceive the information that's being presented on your website. Operable, users may be able to operate the interface. So that's like, if that's using a mouse, if they're using a keyboard. Understandable, users must be able to understand the information as well as the operation of the user interface. And that means you don't, things are predictable. Like if they click a button, or a link, it takes them to where they think they should go. So it's not like, say, click here to go to this web page and it takes them to a different one. It really must do what you say it's going to do. And robust, users must be able to access the content as technology advances, and that really just means that you are making sure that as the new assistive technologies are coming about, that you're aware, and a lot of things kind of go into favor, they go out of favor, and you want to make sure that you're keeping on top of that so your users are able to access your site. So there are 3 levels of stars of conformance to the guidelines. There's level A, and that's when you do kind of the bare basic bones of making sure web accessibility features are done. A lot of sites do this who are not legally required to, and if you're doing a personal project and stuff like that, I mean that's something that I think it's a really good thing to do, just to make sure yeah, I've done the basic due diligence. Level A deals with the biggest and most common barriers for disabled users, and this is something, as I'm going to talk about in the next slide, is if you're legally required to have your site be accessible. Actually, as of January of this year, you're required to be at a level AA. And AAA is, most sites don't do that. It's, it would be cool if they did. This is you are going above and beyond, and that's awesome, and I think a lot of people should strive towards that, but I think not so much where you're not needing at least AA at the very least, if you're required or not required. And yeah, so depending on what industry you work in, you are required to have a site that is accessible. So if you work in healthcare, insurance, if you work in government agencies, and some government-funded institutions, it's a little bit depending on how that funding is coming to your company, if you're required to or not. Banking and financial institutions, this is not all, this is not just everything. There's other state and local laws, depending section 504 deals with educational institutions, and they have a lot of overlap, but their own kind of requirements for that. If you're doing business in other countries, depending on how you're doing business in that country, you also might be required to follow their guidelines. And even with other countries, they all usually follow the WCAG guidelines. Best practices. So I just want to, this is a little short, and I just want to give a little bit of kind of what you can do. I will be putting up, after this talk tomorrow and over the weekend, kind of resources where you can go for, especially if you want to know more I want to know more about how I can code a form or how I can code navigation. So I'll be putting this up, and so this is just going to be kind of a brief, high-level overview. So if you have, with your content, don't rely on color to communicate, information or messages. So this is something that happens a lot with error messages. So a lot of people, if you have an error, there's nothing said. There's no error message. It's just a red box. And someone who has color blindness may not be able to see that. And they're wondering, well, I'm trying to submit this form, but it's not letting me. And there is something wrong, but they don't know that. Provide transcripts and captions for media, and making sure those captions are, and transcripts are correct, because it's really important, especially depending on what you're doing, that you're getting the meeting that you want to have to people. Provide alternate text for pictures, charts, and images, and this is something that's really easy to do. How many times that I know, like in VS Code, I'll just like pop up an image, and it has the alt text, like the alt text in there, but a lot of people don't put that in because it's like, whatever, put my image in, I'm good. But it just even takes a second of just saying, this is a cat on, on the counter. I talk a lot about cats. Ensure all content can be navigated with the keyboard alone. This is super, super, super important, because as I said, a lot of assistive technologies depend on keyboard navigation for it to work. So yeah, you may want to have some game that's like, oh, it's like click and you can click and drag and stuff like that, but if you don't have an alternative to that, it's really, you have really locked up a lot of people who could be coming to your site and to enjoy it. With code, use semantic HTML. HTML5, a lot of the features that were put into it are accessibility friendly. I know there's a lot of times you want to be like, I'm going to make this cool, component, and it's going to do all this stuff. And guess what? It's completely trash, because I can't navigate it through a keyboard. And maybe trash is hard, it's a little bit harsh, but whatever. But if I'm trying to come up, that's how I think. If I'm trying to navigate on a keyboard, that's what I usually just say to them, this is trash. I want to access this site, but I can't. So using semantic HTML is really, really important, and it's something that really doesn't take a lot to do. We all know, a lot of you in this room know how to use semantic HTML, you know how to code for it. It's not something that's a huge learning curve or barrier. Waria, which is Aria, Aria is accessible, rich internet applications. It's attributes that you can add to HTML markup to make things accessible. It predates HTML5, and it's because and it's really allowed people, when you had things that were custom, that were really hard to that really didn't interact well with different screens, especially the screen readers, that you could put Aria on that, and it would help with accessibility. Now it seems to me that a lot of places are just like, well, we want to worry about accessibility to the very end, and we'll just slap Aria on it. And that's really not what it's for. And I realized with this, I got this off of Mozilla, they put this on, I guess it works, but it's kind of like they didn't really need to put, use Aria roles and onto that. I don't know, that was their example, and I don't know, I'm kind of scratching my head, why did they do that, the example? But just don't use it. When you have to, when you have custom things that you can't, help, or you're trying to kind of backward compatible sections of your site, please use it, because making, it's better than nothing, but when you can retool, refactor your code to use semantic markup, please do. So that is the end of this talk. I have put my presentation up all on GitHub. I will be adding more information over the next few days. I really want to thank you guys for coming and listening to me talk and ramble on and be super, super nervous, because this is really important. I mean, we all want people to come and enjoy the things that we build. And, we all deserve, no matter who we are, what our capabilities are, different kind of impairments, we deserve to be able to access things that we wanted to do. And some of the stuff is very necessary. It's for jobs, it's for, to keep in contact with loved ones. That's just something that's really, really, really important. And I hope you liked my talk, and I will open it up for questions, and I did that. Thank you. Oh, and if you have questions, I'm going to ask for you to use the mic, just because I'm going to transcribe this. Can I? No. Okay, sorry, it moved. I'm going to transcribe this. But, okay. So it'll really help for me to hear, so I can do that. And also, I'm not the best at parrying back people's questions, so I want to make sure I understand you completely.
Hey, it sounds like there's a whole lot of different types of disabilities. It can range widely. What are some user testing resources, places where people could get actual users who really have that deep understanding, that personal understanding for these sorts of things?
Sorry. Yes, and that's something I probably should have stated. Like, when you are building out your features and it comes to testing, probably the best thing you can do is have users of different disabilities to test out your website. I know I've been a part of companies that use the Blind Institute of Technology that's here in Denver, and they have people who are training in. One of the things I didn't add, a lot of people who are blind are unemployed because they can't find jobs. I think, and don't quote me on this, I think for people who have severe blindness, the unemployment rate is it's like near 80%. And so the Blind Technology really helps to train people who are blind into different fields. So some like a place like that, there's various there's other places called like Level Access. They're huge consulting firms that have people of different disabilities who can help test and kind of consult with you about what you need to do. I don't know a lot of them off their head. That's something I'm going to add to my into my resources, so you can kind of know. Also, I mean, one thing that doesn't hurt is like when you're kind of just go through. If you have, I mean, most of us probably have a Mac. If you turn on VoiceOver and just go through your site that way, or if you're doing mobile development, turn on. TalkBack is free in the Google Play Store. You already have VoiceOver if you have an iPhone. If you don't have a Mac and you don't, as NVIDIA, that is free that you can use for testing. Also, Chrome has a screen reader. It's kind of, I've had some issues with it, but it's better than nothing.
Cross-browser support for accessibility, software for accessibility, HTML5 and tag reading and whatnot. Is there an issue between Google and Explorer that we should know about, or is a set of kind of practices going to work in Chrome just like they're going to work in IE?
I know there's still a lot of, especially with HTML5, that is not available, like different features that are not available in all browsers. So that is probably something you will run into with that. For the most part, with ARIA, like that really isn't an issue. Again, I'm not going to say, don't quote me on that. There might be issues between different browsers and different ARIA attributes. For the most part, semantic HTML5 and semantic markup will cover a lot of things. There is going to be some tweaking. A lot of my accessibility testing was done on mobile, and there were issues between Android and iOS. So when our developers would I'm getting tongue-tied there. So when there was with the iOS app, certain things were great, and they were like navigation was really awesome. And I would go and test in Android. Things were not. That's to say, they were not great. And so there is going to be tweaking between like different OSs sometimes and different browsers. So it's kind of one of those things that you have to go and kind of like, that's why testing is important, especially testing, manual testing versus there's a lot of automated tools that you can find online that really do help, but a lot of testing that is really needed for accessibility really comes from manual, because it's really, there's not a lot you can do automation-wise. That's changing, but just right now, that's something that's really big, is just kind of, you have to go in and check for yourself to make sure that things, and there are going to be issues, just because, just with anything, a lot between the browsers, it's not a one-to-one comparable thing.
Yeah, thanks.
Speaking more about manual testing, is there a list of tools available on like the Chrome Web Store or something that you can download and install that kind of give you insight into different types of disabilities and how they would be able to interact with your website?
Yes, there are a ton, and sorry, there are quite a lot. And if you go into like the Chrome extension store, there are quite a few, just by searching accessibility, there are a lot that will come up. I believe there's at least one in the audit tools that they're just in the developer tool kind of panel. Yes, unless I downloaded that, but I don't believe that. I believe that came right out the box. I will make sure that I put that stuff up onto my GitHub, so you can have that a list. There's so many. Also on the WCAG site, they have a list of quite a few tools that they have themselves built and use, and that's anything, a lot of things from just like with navigation, especially color contrast, which is a huge thing for a lot of people trying to do that. So yeah, there really are a lot of automated tools out there, but again, manual, make sure you're doing that in conjunction with manual.
With the levels of compliance, whatever that word was, is that a self-reporting thing, or is that something that is held collectively? Like, these websites are awesome, these suck.
If you're not legally required, it's really kind of something just you're doing yourself. If you're legally required, I mean, there's no agency that's going to come and like check it for you. The thing is that if you're legally required, there have been a number of lawsuits that have hit a lot of companies for millions of dollars, where they're supposed to be they're legally required to have their site accessible, and they do not. There's a case with Winn-Dixie where their site was not accessible, and I forget how many millions that they had to end up paying out because they just didn't do it. So yeah, it's one of those things that you really, as a company, if you're doing like personal projects, it's really something that you should just do. It's not something that is going to be required of you. No one's going to come and look at your site. But if you're a company and you have contracts, especially with the federal government or different kind of major like airlines, you want to make sure that you are legally, like, you do or do not, but it's one of those things that you should just, because it's good to do. I don't know the time, so I want to make sure. 10 minutes, okay. Any more? Oh.
So I have a question about common UX or UI patterns that are used today that may not be accessible, and if you have any that you would advise against.
So that is, off the top of my head, that's something I'm trying to, I know there are, and it's one of those things of, I'm blanking out right now. An article I just read, which I kind of referred to earlier, is dark patterns and panic and anxiety disorders. That is something that a lot of I want to say a lot of websites, but enough out there do, where they try to trick people into like, oh, well, click this if you don't want to subscribe to this. A lot of unsubscribe things, like you're like, unsubscribe to this newsletter, and it takes you where you click it, and then it's like, oh, it takes you to another place where it's like, did you mean to do that? And it's like, if you didn't mean to do that, go all the way down here to click that. I know with something, the countdowns with, if you're buying tickets. I know with Eventbrite does that for a lot. If you're signing up to go to an event, if you log in and you selected your number of tickets, there's a countdown. That's something that's really, for someone who has anxiety, someone who may have difficulty understanding different tasks, that's something that's used a lot by event-based websites, and it's really something that causes a lot of issues depending on if someone has a anxiety or panic disorder, someone who has trouble processing certain information, who maybe have trouble processing different time. So yeah, so again, there's something that you might want to look at is, and I put on the, is Microsoft's Inclusion 101 Toolkit. Has some great resources about different UI and UX things that you can do and what and not do when it comes to designing different interactions. More? Okay, that's it. Well, again, so thank you all for coming to my talk and asking some great questions. And again, I will be putting, that's what I'm going to be doing this weekend, is to get that all up for you, so just kind of refresh. You can hit me up on Twitter or email and be like, is it there now? Now, please don't do that, because I really will get it. But please feel free to reach out to me, ask me any sort of questions. I know I put a lot at you, and if you have, and so I'm so willing to kind of, again, if I didn't know some stuff offhand, but I'm more than willing to go and research, because that's kind of what I'm gonna do, and that's what I do right now. So please feel free. Okay.